Well, hello, my beautiful goddesses. How are you all? I'm so excited. I always start every podcast with I'm so excited, but I generally am excited. But I'm even more excited because we not only have a repeat guest, but one that's going to bring with us some amazing topics that we need to talk about. We need to have these discussions. We need to make these commonplace discussions amongst women, and also to maybe help you. Beautiful ladies, as we move through our perimenopause and menopause in life, to give you some ideas and strategies. And that's what we're going to do with the wonderful Leigh Campbell. So welcome to the Goddess Got Goals podcast, Leigh Campbell.
Lovely to be back. I love
know.
chatting with you. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. And I think what's interesting is this is just like everybody having a insight into what we talk about in a coffee shop.
Yeah, this is. And we have some discussions, don't we?
And it's like we have these discussions in coffee shops, and this is normal for us. And I'm not sure if it's normal for a lot of other people, but we want to make it more normal, right? We
Yeah.
want to be able to normalize a lot of these conversations because when it comes to hormones, when it comes to menopause, when it comes to HRT, when it comes to all of these things, there seems to be a lot of taboo. There's a not talked about. There's misconceptions. So we're going to use this amazing time to blow a few of those myths and misconceptions out of the water, but also maybe give both hope and maybe some actions that ladies who are going through this currently as well can maybe take from. So before we get started, now people will know you from the last time you're on, and we will 100% link to that episode, but tell us a little bit about why you are now moving more towards talking about menopause, specifically to do with the HRT stuff, and just where you're at right now with your business and what you're trying to do.
Part of the reason why I changed my business in a slightly different direction, I still do the work I did before, but I focus now more on midlife women, is because I didn't get the help I needed. There was nowhere for me to go. And I don't want anyone else to suffer like that. And I want to bring the facts, bring the options, and also the neurological side of it is obviously with me being a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist, that's really important. And it's never really talked about. They just hand out antidepressants and they just don't talk about it. And it's something that people don't realize, that hot flushes and insomnia and all that kind of stuff is neurological symptoms of menopause. And I didn't even know that, and I'm a psychotherapist. So I have found out through my own education and doing the training with Dr. Newson, who's a leading menopause specialist, that I'm able to shut out the noise and do what's right for me. And that is really what I want everybody to be able to do for themselves. They need to.
And that's perfect. Exactly the message that we want to get across with this episode is do what's right for you. So although we're going to talk specifically about HRT and some other treatment plans and other different things, but the most important message we want you to take away from today is do what's right for you. And that might not be what the doctor is telling you. That might not be what your sister, your mom, your whoever is telling you. You need to spend time doing your own research, maybe seeking out these experts, listening to us today, whatever it might be. But ultimately, it comes down to do what's right for you. And I really want that to be the message today. So that's perfect.
And without judgment and shame, because there's a lot of judgment and shame on both sides, and it has to stop.
Well, judgment and shame, full stop, needs to stop.
Yeah,
we talk about judgment and shame a lot here on the podcast because it's one of the major barriers for all women when it comes to it, wanting to achieve more or to better themselves. It really is. So, but we will continue that vein for sure here without the judgment and shame. So tell us a little bit about what's been happening with you recently. We know that you have been heavily featured in some national publications specifically for your story about your difficulty to find HRT, and talk a little bit about that, and also, what is HRT and what is it meant for you?
So I started HRT 3 years ago when I was 43. I had to remember that. And I was really struggling with a whole lot of things. But recently, the reason that I was in the news was because there's a lot of shortages of body identical gel, which is exactly cellularly, structurally the same as your body. And it's made from yams as well. So it's become very, very popular because it is body identical. It is very safe. And unfortunately, lots and lots of people have been asking for it and then they can't get it. And I was in the Independent and it went a bit viral. It was picked up by Yahoo and it was 26 million plus people,
Wow.
which was amazing, because it's like you're sharing your story to help others, and it's like, yes, get this story out there for other women as well. And then I was featured in the Daily Mail after that as well. So all around how HRT shortage is affecting me and millions of other women living their lives the best way that they can. It's for
really
some of us, we need it, and it's
right.
not a case of
So
just
let's talk about that
mm,
part. So let's talk about your journey to discovering that HRT was the choice for you, right? So let's start first of all with, let's bring it all the way back to
oh,
perimenopause and your story for that, because I know that yours is a particularly challenging one, and
yeah,
with the interactions you've had with doctors and all of that. So if
yeah.
you could,
So
let's dive into that bit.
I was the fittest and healthiest I've ever been in my life. Happiest, fittest, healthiest at 41. I thought, this is brilliant. I've got this, I've got midlife sussed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I started bleeding like I was dying every couple of months. And I was told it was my age, but yet there was nothing to help. And it was only through studying about that, it was my progesterone. So your progesterone is the first to dip, and it goes steadily like this, right? So mine was very, very low. And that's why I was flooding, because the estrogen was unopposed and it hadn't started to decline at that point. But I was really suffering. Like, I wasn't able to work for 2 or 3 months at a time. And the only thing they offered me was the coil, and I'm not into that at all. And it's synthetic progesterone called progestin. And this is the thing that I want to say. I take the other part of my HRT, apart from the body identical gel for estrogen, I take progesterone, which is natural, body identical. It's the only one. It's called Utrogestin, and it's not synthetic progesterone. And it's really important because it is natural. That's just basically it. It doesn't suppress your hormones like synthetic hormones do. But yeah, so I was getting increasingly.
Which also contraception does, which is suppress
Yes,
and manipulate your hormones. We
yes,
want to work with the cycle, not suppress and manipulate it, for sure.
yeah. So the body identical HRT supplements you. It doesn't suppress you. And that's really, really important. And also for risks and things like, and safety as well. But for me, that was the start of it. And then the doctors wouldn't really help me much. Gave me all sorts of hormonal non-contraceptives and all different things, and I was still suffering. I was standing on stage in Birmingham and I flooded the stage and ended up in hospital. I passed out in airports, and that just wasn't good enough for me. But then I started with for me, I'm usually very confident and very happy person, and I was waking up in the middle of the night feeling dread, like my parents were going to die in about an hour's time. Like, totally illogical, totally not good, not sleeping. So therefore it impacts your whole life. And actually I was pretty much at risk of losing my business because I couldn't work. I have never had a hot flush. So I want to make it clear,
Right.
you do not have to have hot flushes. It is not a prerequisite for perimenopause. I had joint pains as well, and I was weight training a lot, and I gave that up. And that was really soul destroying for me. I could hardly get out of bed. I felt like I was 90. So that was my start to perimenopause. And I had a great diet. I was very healthy. I tried acupuncture. I did all the sort of things in my head at the time, thinking, I'm not going to give in. I'm going to keep going. All the things women say to themselves, I'm not giving in. I'm going to suffer on. And I decided, no, I wasn't going to suffer on anymore. And I went and found the right help that I needed, which involved a lot of research.
Right. And I mean, I think that's the key thing. Like, we have had another lady come in to talk about her journey with perimenopause and how she almost murdered somebody with a knife. And
Yeah.
may joke about this right now, but in that moment, that's how, that anger and stuff that she had.
Yeah.
And doctors were going to send her to anger management rather than actually, like, hold on, there's a reason why suddenly this very
Yes.
peaceful, loving
I hate
person
that.
has
I
turned.
was offered antidepressants 3 times in one appointment. And like, I'm a psychotherapist. I know I'm not depressed. I was like, I'm not depressed. I'm waking up in the middle of the night because my cortisol is rising, my estrogen's dropping, my progesterone's through the floor, and I'm not depressed.
And the fact that, none of the hormone discussions are happening it is a sad situation.
Frightening.
So
Yeah.
I So yes, let's talk about the research and the journey you went through yourself with regards to that, because again, I want to empower women here, or I want them to step into their power with regards to knowing that sometimes it might fall to you to put this effort in. We can obviously recommend and talk about your wonderful specialist that you went to, but I think the most important part of that is that you went, enough's enough. I'm going to take responsibility here. I'm going to take charge.
That was really, nobody was helping me. So I thought, and because of what the work I do, I'm very solution focused anyway. And I had the strength to do it. Not every woman has the strength to do it. It's so basically I started researching why and what was going on with me. And then I found lots of different factual information. But I read a book called Estrogen Matters, and it's by an oncologist breast cancer specialist called Avram Blooming.
Well, and I got her to put a link to the show notes so you can check it out.
Matters. So he is like the expert in this. And it really opened my eyes to taking HRT. Because like most women, they're maybe have concerns about breast cancer because that's what's been told is the risk, right? However, when you read this book, you realize actually that isn't quite the case, and how the studies, the old studies, the one that created all the problem in the first place, was based on 63-year-old women who were well past menopause, as in the time, 50, 51, obviously. They were overweight, they were drinking, they had heart problems, lots of different things, and then given high doses of synthetic HRT. So the study itself was very, very flawed. And if you actually go into most of the studies, you actually see that estrogen reduces your risk of breast cancer. It's more when you have synthetic progesterone that the slightest increase happens. And that actually, if you drink a glass of wine every night and you're really overweight, you're actually hugely more at risk of breast cancer than taking anything.
We just did an episode called Do You Coffee Up and Wind Down? Or thereabouts, I think it was called. And we looked specifically at the links between wine and caffeine as well, and breast cancer and cyst formation and things like that. So I'll put a link to the show notes in that. But yeah, I think this was the topic and chat that we had. Most of my listeners know, in terms of my own history, of my mum, who did have cancer, who we think it either started in the lung or the breast and then went to her brain. But my mother, although she died very young, she was only 61, she was a long-term smoker, long-term drinker, particularly Northern Irish in those natures. So even though she had similar, what you've described there, the flooding and things like that, she was probably already very high estrogen or estrogen dominant because of these, the lifestyle choices that she'd made. Although she ate very well in terms of how she ate lots of fresh vegetables and things like that. Obviously got no exercise because that's not what women prioritized in the way that we think about it now. But for me, when I knew that she had HRT, that was the thing that they said, just tipped it over the edge. But that was because the doctors, in my experience, didn't do their due diligence of, okay, well, if she's taking a synthetic progesterone and she's already estrogen dominant and she has these lifestyle factors that are very prevalent, and she was honest with those things, that should never have happened.
No, it shouldn't. If you're monitored correctly, if you make a decision that this is what you need and this is what you want and life is better with it, then you should get the care to manage that and look after you. I have history of ovarian cancer. My grandmother died at my age. So it was a thing that I did think about, because it can be estrogen related, but a lot of it isn't. And even vulvovaginal cancer, they're not estrogen related. And neither is, there's a lot of talk about certain cancers being estrogen related, but they're not. And I think that also needs to be dealt with, but that's a different conversation.
Did you know actually that there was a study? How random is this that this is in my brain? There was a study that was done in like the 60s about the effect of estrogen on heart disease, as an example. But you know how many people were in that study? How many women were in that study? None.
Probably very few. Yeah, I was
going to say whole thing on men.
We're treated like little men. That's what we're treated like.
Basically, this just goes to show in terms of that, we aren't even studying the effect of estrogen on these things. So I can understand why the doctors are having difficulty, because it's just not in their repertoire, it's not in their history,
It's not.
but it's still not good enough. It's not good enough.
It's not good
People
enough. And none of the doctors here receive any training going through medical school. That has to change, because these things have a knock-on effect with osteoporosis, our brain health, our sleep, our mental health. I have so many women who are referred to fibromyalgia consultants, who are referred to heart consultants because they get palpitations all the time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them except their hormones are changing. And not once in like 5, 7, 10 years does a doctor say to this woman or these women that this might be the case. Right. So you sort of think, surely out of like 6, 7 doctors, somebody might go, it might be your estrogen.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm very lucky to have, had direct contact and a relationship with a Harley Street medical doctor who was both pharmaceutically and nutraceutically, so holistic trained, who actually invented an amazing thing for menopause, but he's as a breast cancer specialist as well. And the thing that that's why he moved. He literally changed from being a GP pharmaceutical doctor to like more functional doctor style and more into the hormones, because he's like, this is the area that we need help. This is the area that is just the gap. So although he's private now, he's actually offering amazing tools for women specifically during hormonal changes, and is actually even also advocating for infrared style breast evaluations instead of horrible squeezable mammograms.
Yeah, I just had one, so I can relate. And I'm not exactly small on top either, so it's never fun.
Like literally turn them into cheese toasties.
But so I was very lucky that the specialist that I went to, she is very holistically minded as well as very fact and evidence based as well, which I love science and I love the evidence, and that sort of helps me. But as you know, I'm quite woo-woo as well. So I like the balance that I get from what I do as well. But yeah, without that support from that specialist, I don't think I'd be where I am now. I think I'd have lost everything, because the GP wouldn't even, I was 41, 42 at the time. You're too young, but it's your age. Like, so what does that even mean?
Yes. What is it? Is it this? Is it that? Yes.
Yeah, so I was pleading with them for hysterectomy at that point, and actually 4 years on, I'm still waiting for an ablation, which
I've heard as well. Yes, I had somebody on my Facebook page, and I was like talking to them, and they're based actually in the States, and I was like, she's like, no, I'm just going for I can't do anymore. And I'm never one to talk anybody into or out of anything. I'm not here to convince anyone. We're here to provide information to help people empower themselves. But I did reach out to her and said, look, let's look at other options, because it's very invasive. Like that's invasive.
And the one thing they didn't tell me about the ablation to help with the bleeding was it actually makes you infertile. I was 41. Like, I hadn't really necessarily decided about what I wanted to do with my future life, having kids or whatever. I had pretty much decided I wasn't, but at the same time, if I'd met somebody that might have come into my life, I might have changed my mind. And you can still have a baby when you're perimenopausal. So it was just like, so yeah, nobody tells you these things.
You can have like a last little minute burst of
so like the consent wasn't even there, that worries me. And it is very important that when you do decide to go to a GP and they do help you with the HRT, that it is shared decision making, that it is your choice, and that it's a shared pathway. It should not be them telling you antidepressants or not, or it's your choice. If you can show that you're knowledgeable, that you're your own advocate, this is your decision, then you should be able to trial it for 3 months. They should not say no.
Yes. And I think that's in a lot of the time, it is working. I always say you need like an orchestra for health. Right? Overall health and wellness is an orchestra of people, or a team of people, right? So, yes, does the GP play a role for certain things? 100%, and also especially if you are trying to get prescribed certain medications, because it's not that medications are bad, it's knowing when and how they can be used to help and support you, but also understanding the side effects or the knock-on effects of that. you know, if you think about how a GP's motivation is, and it's not, again, not their fault, it's just the way the system is set up, is more often they're incentivized by the number of people that are taking certain products, the types of products that they're taking in terms of the prescriptions, etc., and just how quickly they can see people. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
that is
kind
it.
of
Yeah.
that they're you know, incentivized by. So, you know, it doesn't really serve them to go into lengthy conversations about what's going on. It doesn't serve them not to prescribe you something, or at least attempt to prescribe you something. And it literally is just, you know, treating people en masse generally. You know, that's what a general
Yeah.
practitioner is.
Yeah, they are
So
general. So if you're struggling, try and seek somebody who's a specialist
who's
who
a
knows what they're talking about.
who knows what they're talking about and whose life it is. Like, if you think about your life's purpose and what you enjoy doing and how you do that in the world and how much you enjoy the studying and the serving and all of that,
Mm.
that's what a specialist is. Like, they've dedicated their life to this particular, you know, area, this focus, etc. So let them do what they are, you know, good at. And I love that, to support
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I'm educating my doctors in my surgery by telling them where to get the best, you know, training from. They have training access free on their every computer in the surgeries in every part of the UK. They can log on to 14 Fish, do the confidence and menopause training, and they're done. I've done it. So for me, if I've done it, they can do it. You know, and it covers everything from the natural remedies to body identical HRT, and the old style HRT, which they don't use really anymore. So most of them don't know that though. And
yeah.
that's the thing. It's all awareness. And it's not their fault they don't know it, but if we tell them and they still don't do it, that's when
We have another guest who was on that you think you maybe listened to that podcast already, which was about healthcare corruption exposed, and we're bringing him back to have the conversation specifically about hormones, and really that's where his journey started, because that's what he saw, was that there was no help with that, and he started to, you know, and also how that specifically in the US, the drug companies around, you know, they didn't want you to access these because it was doing them out of doing them out of work and money and profit from antidepressants and the other things that they get.
Yeah, because doctors get extra money for prescribing depression. So this, it is not even the NICE guidelines and the British Menopause Society, none of them will tell you that antidepressants are first line treatment for hormone deficiency. Why treat a hormone deficiency with that? I mean, you can try diet, holistic, all sorts of things to help yourself anyway. And it gets me really angry. So this is where I get really, because even they give them out and don't read the guidelines. And I'm like, these are antipsychotic drugs. They're not just a hormone supplement that you take a small amount of to help you feel good. They make you feel like this. You're neither up or down, or you can feel worse. And it also, you know this, it works against your weight loss as well. And you know, so if you've got low estrogen and antidepressants, it's like a double whammy
of ballooning and making, and then which again has a knock-on effect with your confidence, and it just goes and goes and goes. I mean, it's not a solution, and it's not even, I wouldn't even say that it's even trying to deal with the symptoms, because it's not a band-aid. It's just a full-on stick that band-aid on, let them next, please. It's here's the band-aid, move on.
They also give out there's a certain drug, propranolol, for anxiety. There's never been any studies in this world that show that helps anxiety, not one. So like it's also very irritating when you hear that. So I get clients, you know, who are on antidepressants, you know, beta blockers, then they're on other things for pain, and you're just like, no, this is not, you know, a good mix. You know, look at the root cause first.
You mentioned at the beginning, and I'd like you to, let's dive into the neurological side of things, which is, you know, the brain stuff, because you talked about hot flushes, you talked about insomnia, you talked about other things that tend to come as an effect of perimenopause and menopause, increased anxiety, like that sense of all those that are mental and emotional things. So talk on that a little, could you?
Okay. Of course. So your brain controls your temperature. So when you start to lose your estrogen and it can't find it to control that temperature, it senses that you're too hot, so then it makes you sweat. And that's basically what it does. It's doing what it needs to do in that moment to keep you happy, to keep you cooler. But then you're suffering because you're waking up in sweat and you're flushing all day and all that sort of thing. Insomnia is pretty much the same thing. You're waking up, your estrogen's dropping, your progesterone is what keeps you more asleep, or helps you get to sleep, and then your estrogen's what keeps you asleep. So if they're all out of balance, it's not going to help you sleep. And the anxiety thing, those hormones keep you quite a lot more calm. Progesterone's very good at calming. Estrogen's very good at making us more, I think, more, what's the word, people pleasing, possibly, right? Without going into too much, right?
Yeah,
so when that starts to all shift, you actually, can I swear on this podcast?
Yes.
You actually start to give less of a shit about things, right?
Apathy, yep.
Right, so you can get more angry. That's another symptom as well, the rage. But it's not always a bad thing. You know, people say, because it's women, oh, you shouldn't be angry. You're allowed to be angry sometimes.
Or you shouldn't not give a shit either. You should care about everything like a big earth mother. And
so you know, it's all of starting to realize where you are in your life at that age. And, you know, I can actually change things. This is like a reset. I can use it as a reset and like, what do I really want? What have I been putting up with for 20 years when actually I shouldn't have been?
Right.
But also things like hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, CBT are very good at helping you with hot flushes. And, you know, the control room of the brain, we would use a lot to kind of help you with that if you can't take HRT or don't want to. It's also very effective for anxiety because it breaks the habit. So eye movement therapy is another one that I've just trained in, and it's just amazing at getting rid of those dark thoughts. So there's a lot you can do for your brain without accessing the extra hormones. And it's like a puzzle. It really helps. So even if you do take HRT, work on this too. You know, work on what you want.
Work on the body too, and all of those things. But I mean, the thing that you just talked about there, it's interesting because, you know, I have just done a podcast talking about my own things I've been doing with my own feeling of perimenopausal. I have definitely noticed some symptoms. Now, I am a very self-aware person, probably more.
I know you are. So much.
Because I'm like constantly going, oh, how am I feeling and what's going on and why is this happening and that sort of thing. But I never do it from a fear or amping up my anxiety. I do it out of general curiosity, but also because I believe in the power of my own choices to try and figure and root things out. And I enjoy that process. Yeah, but one of the things that did come up recently, and that's so interesting that you said it, which was apathy. You know, for me, I'm a very goal-driven person. I'm very focused. You know, I really enjoy being, you know, active and working towards something and caring and all of these things. And I just started to feel a bit like, meh. Like I just literally didn't give a shit. That's exactly how I felt.
That was me too.
And I was like, this is not like me. This is really interesting. So again, you know, knowing what I know, I was like, okay, if this is a perimenopausal symptom, which I think it is based on what I know, what do I need to do to look after my estrogen and progesterone? Now, this might sound like the most random question to ask yourself on a day. Like if you're waking up, like I wake up and I often think, what does my brain need today? Like I do.
That's a brilliant way. I wish everybody thought that way.
Right? Or what does my hormones need today?
Yeah.
And you know, knowing what I know about, okay, well, maybe you're starting to move into an estrogen dominance, which is also affecting your insulin, which is why my midsection was getting bigger. Like this is how this all knocks on. So I was like, what can I do for my estrogen dominance? You know, or what can I do to help that seesaw, you know, bring itself back into play. So I know that I already do good things. I eat very well. I do my strength training, but a couple little things were just starting to like creep back in, as they always do. Things like taking too many artificial sweeteners. There's a lot of studies about artificial sweeteners, insulin triggering estrogen and
Yeah.
So that was one that I looked at. And then, things that actually help the body to break down the estrogen so that poor
Oh, that's really
progesterone,
important.
yeah,
Yeah.
so poor progesterone isn't like struggling to do everything. So,
Mhm.
things like more hot baths, hot tubs, steam rooms, taking my milk thistle to help my liver with the breakdown of that,
Yeah.
and then looking at, well, what supports, what am I having in my diet that supports estrogen? So really upping my fiber, things like that. But for me, that's interesting. Like, I'm going to try that and then see if this works. And then
Yeah.
I also went to a healthcare practitioner who helped me work on my brain a bit. And between those two things, I was like, okay. And literally within a couple of weeks, I'm back. Like, it
You're back.
literally healed myself that
Yeah.
quickly with those
You're
practices.
so right. I mean, I think a lot of the women that I see are just, they're not heard or listened to, right? So they feel like they're powerless. And then when they do try to speak to somebody about it, they don't have the confidence or the resilience to do it. And that's where the mindset work really comes in with this. You can get through this without feeling horrid. You may
Yeah.
have your ups and downs. Yeah, you will have moments or days where you just go, oh, I'm
Right.
tired, right? But then, as you say, think about, what
Don't
does my
judge
body
the
need
tired.
today?
Yeah. Don't make
Yeah,
yourself feel bad because you're
yeah,
tired. Yeah.
exactly. Rest if you can. Don't feel guilty for resting. I think, again, women, we're so good at keeping everybody else in our circle well and happy, but we're not necessarily looking after ourselves. And it is a time in our lives, we have elderly parents, possibly kids, schools, exams, all that kind of stuff. But it's essential that you sit and go, hey, I need a day off, or I need to go away for a day, or I need time out, or I need to get acupuncture, go see Lisa, go see Leigh, whatever it is. You need to prioritize this time in your life, because it's setting yourself up for the next third of your life. We live on average 30, 40 years longer than we used to post-menopause. So we need to learn how to live well for that rest of your time.
Yeah, because I
Um,
think that's a perfect way to think of it, because the
mm,
first third of our lives, to be honest with you, we're not mindful at all. We're
we're
just
not.
like, our bodies, it's indestructible, etc. The middle third, we start to feel the effects of that first third by how we've eaten, how we've trained, the mindset stuff, and how we've worked. I can 100% say to you that if you don't do good work in this middle third, that third will not
Yep.
be very long, number
No.
one, which is a horrific thing to say, but very true. And even if it is long, it can end up being horrible in terms of how you feel. So
Yeah.
this is not about how long you live, but how well you live.
Yeah.
And I think that lifespan should be equal health span as well,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. I
So,
don't want to live till I'm 90 and feel horrible. You
right.
know.
Like, you might look, there's a lot of I do a lot of pictures where I see, ladies that are living older, and there's a mixture between ones that are still kicking ass and taking names in their 70s and 80s, whether they're in the gym or they're doing their yoga or they're being really active, or the
Mm,
ones that have, sounds terrible, but you've fallen down and broken a hip, because again, this
mm,
estrogen leads to osteoporosis, leads to,
yeah.
you've got
Yeah.
sarcopenia also happening in there with the
That's
muscle
it.
loss and
Yeah.
all of these things. So it's not that we're fighting against these things, like I must, not have sarcopenia and osteoporosis and cancer and all. It's
Mm,
understanding that it's within our power and within our responsibility, that we
mm,
can do small things. Like, we're not talking, big, massive things here. Small little tweaks in how you eat, how you look after your mental health, how you prioritize your self-care, how you advocate for yourself with your medical practitioners and things like that. These small little things can have a massive, massive effect. And
hugely.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, my aunt, she's 77 and she teaches Pilates. So she's
Right?
she's she's a walking, living
Example of that, right?
example of it. Now, my mum had double hip replacements at 52, due to osteoarthritis, but she was a gymnast when she was younger. So the impact of the hormones did not help. She was, she really struggled. So I was worried that I would struggle, and that's part of the reason why when it did hit me, that I did decide, no, I'm not going to be like this if I can avoid it. you know, and the thing is, you're not your mom. That's the other
Right.
thing,
You're
right?
also genetically, and yes,
You're not
although it
your mom.
might lead you to, either want to be more like them or be less like them, or,
Mm,
with our parents, sometimes we do the opposite, or we want
mm,
to strive to be better or whatever, or, you know, great genes and all of these things too.
Mhm.
So I feel like, yes, but also I feel like it's a different culture that we live in now. Yes, we are feeling the ramifications of that culture from feminism and the patriarchic systems. And don't ask me all about those things, because
Yes, we
I will happily chat about those for hours. But we didn't have, like, even that thought. My mother would never have stepped foot in a gym. She wouldn't even go to a yoga class or Pilates. Like, that would be weird for her, right?
yeah.
That's just the way that they were brought up. She didn't walk, she didn't really do any sort of exercise, but she never sat down either, right? Until she hit
Mhm.
her 40s, where she probably just started to run done.
Yes, I think that's what many women say to me. They feel like they're running done, and they are, because they're not actually resting properly or looking after
Not
themselves
resting, they're not prioritizing themselves. And so we'll say it one more time, ladies. This is just the middle third. There's that final third, but we want you to be friggin' epic in there. Like, think about, what that means. Like, my mom didn't make it to her, or my dad make it to their final third, realistically. So for me, that was I
properly.
do everything now thinking about that final third, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
So, but because, yes, I want to enjoy life now and I want to feel good right now, but I also want to feel good then. And, well, you can do
Mhm.
both. That can be possible. So,
Yes.
okay, if we're going to, because we're going to have to round it up, even though I chat to
We could
you.
talk for hours, couldn't we?
Um, what, like, actions, what, like, if you were to, like, sit down with somebody right now who is having horrendous symptoms or whatever, what would be the 2 to 3 things that you would say, right? This is what I would suggest you do. How are
Number
you
one,
action?
sorry, monitor your symptoms, right?
Right.
Keep a diary of them so you notice any patterns, so that you can see the weeks that you feel worse. What can you do in that time? Or if you're feeling, it also creates a report. You can go online and create a symptom report on the Balance website, Balance app, to give to your GP if you want to go down that route and ask for HRT. So it provides them almost like a medical report. So instead of saying, I have an itchy foof, for instance, it says I have vaginal atrophy, right?
Right.
Doctors understand that terminology more than the other. So,
So
and
what's
then
the name of that app again? And we'll put the link in the show notes, the name
it's
to the
called
app.
Balance, the
Balance.
Balance app. Yeah. And it helps you produce a report for any medical professional that you're going to see, so that
Perfect.
it's in their language and you don't have to then think about, oh my God, what am I going to say? And that you
Normally
forget.
when you go in, you always forget. You always forget what you're going to say. And also, if you're feeling good on that day, it's hard to talk
Mm.
about feeling bad, right?
Yeah, that's it. And sort of just research why you have those symptoms. So, like, the Balance website's brilliant. It's all PDFs and evidence-based research on what's happening to your hormones, why you're dropping, why this is happening. It's very, very good. And anything on there really for evidence-based fact information, that's the only website you probably need to go to in that way, if you want to know the basic facts and evidence of what's happening to you. It shuts out all the noise, and that's what we want. There's so much noise at the minute
Hmm.
about female health and everything else, and there's a lot of people jumping on the midlife menopause bandwagon, trying to sell you menopause shampoo and whatever else, menopause skincare and all. I'm like, no, just look after your skin and your health and you'll still pretty glowy and nice. But you know what I mean. It's like,
No, I see it everywhere. I really do. So
yeah, and make sure your vitamin D levels are good, your vitamin B,
I
your,
didn't tell her to say that, by the way. If anyone who's listening, she just does it because we talk about this a lot. But vitamin D health, very important for hormones. Yes, thank you.
huge. Yeah, huge. Huge. It's one of the most important things, and we're all pretty low on it in these countries, the northern
Yep.
hemisphere. We need a lot more than we're told that we need. Vitamin B12, if you're low on that, can mimic perimenopause symptoms. It's
Yes.
not always going to be perimenopause. It can be something else. That's the other thing.
Excellent.
So blood tests are good in a way to eliminate anything. But if you're over 45 and symptomatic, you are entitled to try HRT for your symptoms if you wish. Under 45, they tend to do the blood test just again to make sure everything's okay. But even that, most of the time they come back normal because of the fluctuating. So that's the other thing. Thank you for the reminder. Blood tests. Always ask for a copy of your blood tests. Go and look online what is low, what is high, and how you feel. Because my low made me feel horrific, right? But I was still normal. Class
Ah,
is normal,
okay.
right? My progesterone was really low and I was still normal, but I didn't understand why I was still normal. So I went and got the copy and be your own advocate where that's concerned. You know,
Yes.
you just have to Google that and you'll find out exactly. You don't need to know the meaning of it, to be honest, or what the measurements are, as in like micrograms or whatever. But as long as you can see a chart and you say, right, well, I'm really low in the normal, that's maybe why I feel so rubbish.
Right.
So yeah, so, and some people, like here, I think in England, you can actually get your results on an app. We can't yet. So you have to ask for it. And if you don't know to ask for it,
Yes.
you don't know.
You can also even get your vitamin D levels tested, and then you
Yeah.
can actually be prescribed vitamin D. So if you're worried about the cost of that, by the way, but you have to advocate for that. No doctor will give you a vitamin
Very
D
true.
test. You have to ask for it. And then again, if you're worried about cost and you want to, especially if you're in the UK and you want to do this on national insurance or whatever, then, you know, for sure, the more that you document, the more you can.
Yeah. The more you write down before you go to an appointment, the better, because it does help you get what you need and get the answers that you need, instead
But what
of like,
about if they wanted to go beyond the GP? So what would be a tip for that?
look for the British Menopause Society. They've got lots of private specialists and they will tell you where your local one is. You will get a lot more time. You will get a lot more listened to. I couldn't, but when I went and had my online, it's all done online mainly now. Just being heard and being listened to and not being gaslighted into thinking I was going crazy. That for me was the biggest change, when I actually said, I'm not crazy. I am menopausal at 42. When everyone was telling me I wasn't.
Right. We have quite a few ladies in our community who were early menopausal too, and the same thing. It was the same thing. They were like, it can't
Yeah.
be.
And the
But
things I've worked with ladies who are 28 postmenopausal, and they haven't had any help whatsoever because they've been told, look, it's just your hormones, and they've been like that since they were a teenager. And you're like, no, if they actually don't have estrogen therapy, then osteoporosis and things they need it. They absolutely need it. It's slightly different to when you get older. But just do your research. Go private if you want to. If you can afford to, I would absolutely recommend you go and see either a private menopause specialist on the British Menopause Society website, or find like the Hormone Doc on Instagram. She's fantastic. She's also she's suffered with breast cancer, so she's brilliant for both sides of the an argument. But you know, if you've suffered with breast cancer, you are neglected in this field hugely. She's brilliant. So again, just find those specialists that feel right for you. Kinesiology helped me too. Eliminating things out of my diet, finding out yeast was a problem for me.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've eliminated that quite a lot, I'm not so good these days. I'm not always perfect, but it has helped massively with bloating and all of that sort of thing. So
yes.
yeah.
So I think that's good. Those are good action points that we'll put lots of information in the show notes. And just want to say thank you for coming on, because this is a topic that needs to be talked about and not just brushed under some sort of carpet. We need to, you know, be proactive, and we also need to empower ourselves with this information. So we will definitely put those links in the show notes where they can go and, you know, continue some research or find that out. And also, where can they hear about you? So where's the best place for people to come find you?
The best place, there's two places: Instagram, so I'm on as Leigh Campbell Coaching, or I have a wellness healing, menopause healing hub on Facebook as well. So those will be the two places you'll find me most.
Perfect. So if you reach out to her, even if you slide into her DMs on Instagram, she can help you with joining that Facebook group or anything like that too. So again, sometimes, as you've just said, just to be seen and heard is the first step. Just to feel like you are not alone, you're not going crazy, you know, you're not again dying, or like some of these symptoms, especially with those heart palpitations and things, really freak us out. So
so many women go to A&E for that reason, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that hormone fluctuation. So don't be scared, don't be frightened. I think there's a lot of talk about it at the minute, and I think it's scaring a lot of women who are not quite there yet. And I would just say, don't be frightened. It's a time to know your body, get to know it, and know what works for you, when we've been told for the last 20, 30 years, you know, not to think about it.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about this in the podcast too, in terms of embracing our cycles. We do embrace our cycles. We understand our circadian rhythms and we embrace it, love it. And,
We
you know,
do.
and I think that this time can be a joyous time for just understanding that this is just the next step of being a woman. It's
Yep.
not the end of being a woman. It's not any of those things that we tell ourselves, that it's just the next transition, the next phase.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can be fabulous.
And it can be fabulous, right? And you can get your sparkle back and you can feel all of the things that you felt with, and with actual, there's other benefits that we didn't get to, but we can maybe
Mhm.
come back and talk about other things that, you know, if you think about it from a different angle and a different perspective, it can actually be a really empowering time for us.
Yes, that's what I love
So,
about
so we'll have her back. We'll have her back, and we'll have her back
it.
chatting about those things. But thank you so much for joining. It's been great. As I said, we could chat for hours, but I'm sure my audience is like, this podcast is long enough. So thank you so
Yes,
much.
please be quiet.
And
Okay.
time to take inspired action now. But thanks again, and thank you for coming on. And we will see
Anytime.
you again very soon.
Always a pleasure.